the Cobb County Government Employees Pension Plan. We've always began with an invitation for public comment. We've had no requests for public comment received prior to the meeting, so we'll continue forward. Mr. Hagler previously distributed minutes. Is that right, Tony? And so, if everybody's, I'm still getting.
Mr. Chairman, this is Virgil, and make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Neil Warren.
Okay, Mr. Moon, second by Mr. Warren. All in favor, say aye, raise your hand. All opposed, same. Therefore, very good. Thank you so much. Previously being distributed and circulated from Bill are invoice payments. So any questions for Bill regarding?
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody go ahead, that's me.
All right, I'm gonna go down the list. If you, can you mute your phone? Alan, Earl, Joey.
I'm here.
Okay, how are we doing now, Neil?
All right, it sounds good now.
Okay, what happens if we get 2 or 3 people with open mics? Some mics start picking.
Is that because you're muted?
Okay, very good. So please distributed invoices. So we hear a motion to adopt.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. This is Virgil.
Thank you.
Second. Second. Yes, Neil Warren.
Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say same. The invoices are approved as distributed. We will sign them short bill when we get together, right? Okay, very good. All right, so I'm going to ask everyone, and that includes Mr. Wright and Sheriff, if you can mute your phone, because I'm going to call upon Joey to go ahead and begin the actuary report. Joey, you'll need to unmute. I can't hear Joey. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? All right.
Joey, can you dial in on the phone as well? So. Don, Kimberly, is there anything that y'all can do to help?
We can call him. We can give him a
call him
call.
again.
He's not muted on our end.
Okay.
I'm going to call his cell. He didn't answer last time, so.
Roger, I don't know if you want to go on to the SunTrust or UBS while they work on Joey's. You're muted, Roger, so.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, let's do that. Do you want to go ahead and, are we doing a trust report as well today? I don't think so.
Get anything from Lisa? I don't know if she has anything to report, but she is on the line.
Okay, let's go ahead and jump. Lisa, do you have anything to report? Just just to check a box while Joey's trying to call in.
No, I don't.
Okay, good. We'll let the minutes reflect that no action items or information coming regarding trust. And Joey, you're trying to call in right now, I see. All right, well, let's do this in the interest of time. Y'all want to go ahead and jump to UBS?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll ask our actuaries to continue to try to work on technical connection details, and we'll go ahead and start with our advisor report from our friends at UBS.
Can anyone hear me now?
Joey?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on with the computer here this
All
morning.
right, well, so stay on the agenda then. We'll go ahead and Joey, go ahead and lead off our actuary report.
Okay, we'll start with slide 2. Sylvia, if she can, I think she's sharing the presentation.
This is Virgil. Tell us what report we're looking. We got 3 different reports.
We're looking at the pension valuation report. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, all right.
Just like in the
Sylvia,
report, which documents so Sylvia can pull it up, Joey.
okay, yeah, we're looking at slide 2 here on the pension valuation presentation and OPEB valuation. So the basic funding equation, obviously we go over this every year. Contributions plus investment income has to equal the benefits plus expenses. Ideally, on your contributions, that would make up about 40% of your assets, and the investment income would ideally make up about 60% over the life of the pension plan.
This is Virgil. I don't see anything on the screen.
Yeah, we're having problems with the share screen. Kimberly, I don't know if y'all can help out. Sylvia can't share her screen.
Sylvia, go ahead and try it now.
Very good. We got it now. Can everyone see it?
Slide 2.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking at the presentation, Sylvia, not the report. If you can pull up the presentation. There we go. Okay. And we'll move on to slide 3 and just get into the results. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to review the pension valuation report. Market assets had a very good year, 22.81%. Again, this is our estimation of market value based on middle of the year. So this is just, can sometimes be a little bit different than what UBS, but it should be very close to what UBS reported for calendar year 2019. On an actuarial value basis, where we smooth the assets, you get 7.34%. Again, we're lowering the discount rate this year to 7.25%, so came in pretty well on target there on actuarial value basis.
Hold on, this is Virgil. This is Virgil. Should we ask questions as you go or wait till the end?
You can do it however you would like, Virgil.
I'm asking the chairman.
Virgil, normally I would say take them as you get them. Given the technology tonight, just do the presentation and then come back for questions.
That'll be fine. Thank you, Roger.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So again, the markets had a difficult calendar year, but we're measuring this as of January 1. So if we want to look at some projections, which we'll get to later, we can definitely look at some scenarios for calendar year 20 returns based on market value expectations. Obviously, we don't know what that's going to be, but just keep that in mind. As far as the liabilities go, pay increases averaged about 6.3% increase compared to 3.3% expected. This was because primarily the pay and step study, so the public safety employees got, I believe, 7% in October. General employees got 4%. So that's factoring all those increases in. And your total valuation payroll increased by about 4.9%. I believe the last 6 years it's averaged about 3.3, and we're assuming 2.5, so that's good on a total payroll increase because that's how your amortization basis is calculated. If we look at the important statistics as far as the makeup of the plan, traditional participants versus hybrid participants, the hybrid participants make up about 1/3 of the total membership, over half of the active membership. However, the traditional plan member participants still make up almost 99% of the total accrued liability. So that's about 1.3% of your total accrued liability is attributed to the hybrid plan. So it's a very cost-effective plan. Again, your costs are primarily with the traditional participant plan. And moving on to slide 4. The contribution for traditional members increased 0.25% in March of 2020. That's scheduled to go up another 0.25% for the next 3 years. Hybrid participants remain the same at 3%. And so what we do is we blend the employee contribution rate. So if you look at the report, you'll see this blended rate of about 5.7% based on actual hybrid and traditional membership. We did, based on the board's actions in August, reduce the discount rate assumption from 7.5 to 7.25%. They did increase the unfunded liability by $34 million, increase the county's contribution rate by 0.81%. Again, the board's taking proactive steps to lower that discount rate. It started out at 8%, in 2013 and before, and has been consistently lowered since then to currently 7.25% with this valuation. Even with that, the funded ratio, which we'll show shortly, remained relatively stable. So that's definitely a positive sign there. And there was a small plan amendment to allow certain City of Powder Springs water and sewer system employees to become participants in the pension plan. And it was immaterial to the pension valuation. I believe Elisa will say the same thing for the OPEB valuation. There was only 3 participants that transferred over, so that would be very immaterial to the overall result of the plan. Moving on to slide 5 and 6, sorry. This just shows the trends in active membership and retired membership. Again, you do have a lot of traditional participants retiring, so you do see that the retired membership continues to increase. The active membership has remained relatively stable over the last 6 years, average increase of about 1% per year since 2014. And moving on to the next slide. And this is the average salary and benefit for the for all participants. So the average salary is $59,000, up from $51,000 in 2014, which is about a 2.3% increase on average. There was a 3.1% increase in 2020. Again, you did have that adjustment in October that the board approved for the 7% public safety and 4% general employee pay adjustments. And moving on to the next slide. You can see the payroll and benefits continuing to increase. You can see the payroll increased quite a bit in 2020, primarily because of that pay adjustment in October. An average payroll growth has been about 3.3% since 2014, and again, we're assuming 2.5%. So, now we'll get into just some statistics on slide 9. We'll look at just the average age and membership, average age and service for the pension plan, and also the average retiree age and beneficiary age. Basically, if you look on that right side, that's saying average current age is 43, active service is about 10.5. So that means your average new hire on average is about 32 to 33 years old. So that's once they are hired. Now that's just an average again. So just to give you a statistic there. And now we'll move on to the slide 11. This shows you the market value and actuarial value. Again, we're trying to smooth the market value of assets to create an actuarial value of assets to stabilize the contribution rate so that you don't have those fluctuations in the market, and to smooth that over a 5-year period. Again, I believe based on the current valuation, this year you've got about 43 million in deferred gains that are going to be recognized over the next 4 years. So last year you had deferred losses, so that market value of 22% in 2019 really built up some gains that'll help to offset, the losses in future years, or possibly add to gains in future years as well. So. And you can see again on the next slide, the blue line is just to stabilize the actuarial value of assets. So you can see that the wild fluctuations in 2019 and 2020, we're just trying to stabilize those contribution rates by smoothing the gains and losses over a 5-year period. And we'll get into slide 14, which is the nuts and bolts of the valuation and the actual results on slide 14. Okay, you can see your accrued liability increased by about 91 million. Again, that was a part of that was due to the change in the discount rate. The unfunded increased by about 48 million. 34 million of that was due to the change in the discount rate assumption. The unfunded liability rate went up about 0.5%, and the total contribution rate for the county, the actuarially determined contribution, increased 0.6% from 23.5 to 24.15. So, and again, we're lowering that funded ratio slightly. It went down from 51.9 to 51.6. Had you not made any changes, it would have been 52.9% on the funded ratio as of 2020. So you can see there would have been an improvement had it not been for the lowering of the discount rate. And moving on to slide 15, we'll show the trend in the...
Joey, this is Virgil. Doesn't lowering that amortization period every year from 24 to 23, that also impacts it, does it not?
Yes, because you're using a level percent of pay method. So that amortization period, that amortization payment is expected to go up 2.5% per year until the unfunded is paid off in 23 years. So as opposed to a level dollar amortization where it's more like a mortgage payment. So where you've got the same payment every year. So yes, to answer your question, and again, you're getting to the point now where you're in starting to get into you've been in negative amortization, for a period of time. Now you're getting to the point where you're going to hopefully start paying off that unfunded, because just the way the amortization schedule works, once you get closer to 20 years, then more of that starts going toward the principal on the unfunded liability. And slide 15, again, you'll see that the funded ratios remained relatively stable over the last 8 years. While the liabilities have increased, the assets have performed well. Some comments on this: you will see that the from 2013 to 2018, you stepped down the discount rate from 8 to 7.5. So that increased the liability. You had experience studies in 2014 and 2018, which also increased the liabilities. There was a liability adjustment in 2017 for adding some additional judges. So it can be looked at some ways as a positive, but all those increases in liabilities that the funded ratio has remained somewhat stable. I know you would hope to see that to increase over, and that's definitely what the board would like to see. So. But there's been a lot of liability increases over that time, just to give you some background on that. And we'll break down the gains and losses on the unfunded liability on the next slide. Again, the loss is $34 million on the assumption change, discount rate change for quarter point, 25 basis points. And there was a loss on salary, again, that was primarily due to the pay adjustment in October. Those were the two primary loss items. There wasn't a gain due to additional contributions. County's making additional contributions to the pension plan above the actuarially determined contribution. And
Yeah, this is Virgil. Let me thank Bill and Tony for encouraging the county on those additional contributions when they could afford it. So I really appreciate their leadership there.
And they're still having some mortality losses. Again, just to give you some down the line, next year we're probably going to be doing an experience study. I know you're due coming up pretty soon, and the mortality table is more than likely going to have to be updated. I know we've based that on Employees Retirement System of Georgia retirement table. They're in the middle of an experience study right now. The trend is now to move toward a generational mortality as opposed to a more static table like we're using now. So, but instead of taking a bite of the apple every 5 years on an experience study, the generational mortality is you take the adjustment one time, and then you just basically have to adjust the scale for improvements or declines in mortality going forward. We're assuming that mortality is going to continue to improve, but there can be, with COVID-19 and the opioid epidemic, we don't know what's going to happen in the future as far as mortality goes. So just keep that in mind. And probably next year we're going to be updating the mortality table at some point once we do the experience study. So just keep that in mind there. And that's all the comments I've got on the pension. That was fairly quick, but any questions, I'll be glad to assist.
Roger, I got some questions. You want to wait till the end of everything? You want to go ahead with them now?
Oh, go ahead now, bro.
All right, go back to slide 2. Slide 3, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I understood what you said about the 22.81, almost 23% in market return, and actuarial return was 7.34. I just thought that was that's like a 70%, almost a 70% difference. I was a little surprised it was that much, and maybe.
Yeah. The prior years, you had, like, if you look at last year's results, there was about a $47 million difference in losses that had to be recognized from prior years. So,
Okay. So that was
on page 16 of the report. Yeah. So a lot of that 90 million, I believe, or whatever that's phased in, it's getting, or 138 million on market return. A lot of that's getting eaten up by the prior losses.
Yeah, that's the page that shows the 5-year amortization amounts.
Right, page 16, right.
Yeah, okay, that answers that. On slide 4, this is really a question for, I know we approved back in, I think it was 09 to go from I forgot what it was. It might have been 6 or 7%, all the way up to 8.75 over a long period of time. And we're still in that process. And my question is, when we looked at some of our projections, didn't we do an assumption where the Board of Commissioners might possibly move that up to 10% between 23 and 26? In other words, don't stop it in 23, but go all the way to 10 and see what impact that would have. Didn't we do that? Tony, Bill, y'all might remember.
Well, and I can step in here. I do remember us doing some projections a couple of years ago, stepping up that contribution rate for traditional plan members.
Yeah, I was thinking that's where I was going, because I seem to remember something, because I remember when we set it at 0.25% a year for a long period of time, and it goes all the way to 8.75. But considering where we're at now, I thought we ran another set of numbers, and I couldn't remember.
I do remember in 2017, I believe.
Okay.
Something similar to that. Again, this is a closed group, so that eventually these participants are gonna phase out. So
Yeah, I know that's more.
It's not gonna affect the total contribution. It'll just offset the county's contribution. So.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just running the question. My second question is the hybrid participants, they're continuing at 3%. I thought I saw the normal cost on the hybrid plan at 3.5%. Did I miss that? Okay.
Yes, that's correct. On page, there's a exhibit in the report. The normal cost on the hybrid participants is about 3.5%. So it's costing the county essentially 0.5% with payroll for that plan.
Well, I think our original intention, since they also get the defined contribution benefit, which the traditionals don't, I think the original intention when that was set up as a hybrid plan was for them to contribute enough to cover the normal cost. Now, Tony, do you remember those discussions? Hello? Am I not coming through?
Yes, I remember.
Okay, is that something you and Bill are willing to talk to the county manager about, and at least I'll talk about it? Because I specifically remember that discussion because I did the presentation to the board.
This is Bill. I'm happy to at least have that conversation with the county manager and probably the chair to see if there's any desire to move forward with a change to something like that.
I mean, that's y'all's call, and that's the Board of Commissioners' call, not ours. But sure. I do specifically remember when we set it all up, that was the intention. To cover the normal cost, because they also getting the benefit of the defined contribution, which traditional people don't get. Okay, I just bring that up. Let me see what else I got here. On slide, no, that's not it. I know the answer to that. Y'all told me that. I think that's let's see. Oh, the last one on page 16.
Yes, sir.
So the gains and losses. Explain one more time. I mean, I understand that a third of the 91 million was the change in assumption. I knew about the big salary increase for public safety and others, but again, the mortality was $3 million, and you explained that if we having losses on mortality, y'all going to look at that next year.
Yes, we're going to look at that when we do the experience study, and also, the Employees Retirement System of Georgia is the table that we've used, and they're in the middle of an experience study right now. So as soon as I know something, I can run some scenarios. Looking at
that explains
on that.
That definitely explains it. But when we get to again the contribution rate that's being recommended on the actuarial contribution is going up 0.6%. Is that right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. But I think when we get to OPEB, we're going to see that OPEB is actually going down at least that much or more. Is that right?
Yeah,
I'm
Lisa,
jumping ahead a little bit, and there's a reason I'm making that statement, but we'll talk about it later.
yeah, you can take, I mean, again, funding the pension plan is required, you know, as far as OPEB, you've got some, you know, leeway there, I guess, on whether or not
Okay.
you fund the
Okay.
full contribution.
All right. Those are all the questions I had. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I've got a couple, but I'll let somebody else go first. Okay, I'll go ahead and give mine, which are twofold. The page we're looking at now, number 16. If I'm looking at that right, but for us changing the assumption regarding return from 7.5 to 7.25, which costs us 34 million, right?
Yes.
And the decision by the Board of Commissioners to raise salaries, which costs us 7.6. It looks like we would have actually brought down the unfunded liability amount, because if I take everything else and add it up, including the additional $5 million contribution, I'll get a negative number.
Yes, that's correct.
It'll basically zero, for most part, zero out. Pretty negative.
Yeah, I mean, you would have come in at about, I think
a million,
about
maybe.
about 616 million before any changes on the unfunded. Now you're at 650. So if you take out, so there would have been, yeah, you would have brought that down. That's correct.
Okay, so because the reason when we go to present to the county, one of the pushbacks we get is, gosh, we put in all this money and the funded ratio has not gone up. It actually, went down by 0.2 this year. And I want to say, well, this chunk of it is the board making a move toward realism of lowering the expected return from 7.5 to 7.25. And this chunk of it is due to the salary increases, which we cautioned you guys would do that. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. I just want to make it clear that this is not a black hole they threw $5 million in. We are making gradual progress. And the second would be to go back earlier, following on Virgil's first question, back on page 3. Just to clarify, I mean, the market asset return of 22.8, that's a 1-year number, right?
Yes, that's
last
correct.
year. Where the actual asset return, is that smoothed out 5 years?
Yeah, it's taking 1/5 of that gain basically on the 22.8, and then also four years from the prior years to get to the 7.
It's that 5-year moving average we did to dampen out the apparent performance of the assets. And so 7.34 shows that over the last 5 years, we have essentially, it's a good thing that we lowered from 7.5 to 7.25, because we would not have hit our 7.5, but the 7.25 number looks fairly realistic for now, at least.
Right, and you can see that next year you're expected to, about 10.8 million positive, and then on slide 16 you can see those next 4 years are looking good, but that's again before the 2020.
Right. Which,
COVID-19.
Don't worry, our buddies at UBS are going to give us a good return that year. Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else for Joey?
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Lisa now, and she can present the OPEB results.
Thank you. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Lisa. Go for it.
All right, so I think, what are we on, slide 17 now? Okay, so 18. So here's the health benefit plan funding results. All right, so Joey talked about the population. So then for the OPEB valuation, we do have an additional 121 active employees who are eligible for the health benefit, but not the pension. So those are included, and they have compensation around $7.4 million. Just like the pension plan, the unfunded is amortized over a closed period, and we are at 23 years. We are amortizing over a level percentage of pay, and as Joey pointed out, the payroll is up by about 4.9%, and we assume 2.5%. So with the payroll being up, that makes your percentage of payroll lower than it otherwise would have been when we calculate the contribution as a percentage of payroll. All right, we are still using projected unit credit as our cost method for funding. We've talked about this several years in a row that GASB does require entry age normal. So we do entry age normal for our GASB disclosures, but for funding, we're still using projected unit credit. And just like in the pension plan, we have lowered the investment return from 7.5 to 7.25. So next slide. Okay, last year we started using an asset smoothing, just like what Joey was talking about for the pension plan, using the 5-year smoothing. So because of that, we have a $3.3 million investment gain this year, and we'll have that same 3.3 for the next 4 years. Looking back to last year, we had a $3.5 million investment loss. So those are offsetting, which is essentially what the whole point of the asset smoothing method is for, is to smooth that out. So now you've got the offsetting gain and loss that will carry forward. The loss will run out 1 year sooner, and then we'll have the gain along with the other gains and losses that will occur in the future years. Now, one result, it's a good result, is that we had an $18.7 million gain due to claims experience. Now, for your pre-65 retirees, most of your people are in the HMO plan, and that did have a good year. We assume that claims will go up by about 7%, and for the HMO plan, it went up only a tiny bit. So that was a big gain. The other big gain is that Medicare eligible stipend has not increased. So we're still assuming that it will increase as Medicare premiums increase, which we're still assuming are around 5 or 4.5%. Now, in the past few years, for everyone, Medicare premiums have been very level, if not dropping. So this could be a temporary thing that you don't need to increase the stipend, but it's something to talk about. I mean, are we not looking at increasing the stipend in the future? For next valuation, we might want to talk about changing that assumption if that is going to be the reality, that the stipend's not going to increase, or that it's going to increase by a smaller amount than actual trend. So for this valuation, we're seeing a big gain due to claims. So if we want to change an assumption in the future, we can talk about that. So our actuarially determined contribution as a percentage of payroll has actually decreased, even though our discount rate decreased. So it went from 7.56% payroll last year to 6.71% this year. There's a couple of reasons. One is the claims gain. There's a couple of others we'll talk about in a minute. There's also, of course, the fact that the payroll went up more than expected. And our funded ratios increased also from 41.9% to 47.6%.
This is Virgil. We're getting close to half funded on OPEB. That's got to be a very, very strong number compared to other governments in the country.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And you're getting close to your pension funding. No, that is very good. There are a lot of plans that are much more poorly funded than this, if funded at all. We still are seeing large plans that are 0% funded, but even the ones that are, we're looking at 15, maybe 20. So yes, very good result for your plan to be that well funded for an OPEB.
Well, gosh, Joe, Lisa was able to raise her ratio by 5 points. Why can't you do that?
I know. I'm not as good as her.
Sorry, just kidding you, buddy. All right, thank you. Continue, Lisa.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is where we look at our population. There have been plan changes that have been made that have helped with your funded ratio, and part of that has been that you've changed to a service-based premium structure for certain employees, and you're requiring more and more service to actually get the benefit when people retire. So you can see everybody, the actives there in that box are put in their different buckets. So our number of grandfathered employees is dropping. We only have 25 left. Almost everyone is in that bucket of needing 30 years of service to even get a benefit. So that definitely reduces liabilities. And then the ones who need even less service, some of them are subject to service-based premiums. most of them, so they pay more if they have less service. So that was another good result that helped lower your liabilities and get your funded ratio up, is, you know, realizing that you want to give the better benefit to those with the bigger service. All right, next slide. All right, this is our evaluation results. All the way over here to the right is this year, and then the middle column is last year. So the first line there does show that the compensation has gone up. So that since your rate is a percentage of payroll, that does help your rate to have the compensation go up. Our actuarial accrued liability actually went down, and that's even with the discount rate change. So we'll see that on the next slide, you know, what all happened to contribute to that. Assets went up. That's a good thing. So the actuarial value of assets is going up. So that makes our overall unfunded go down from 176 million to 156 million. So our amortization as a percentage of payroll went down from 4.83 to 4.09. Normal cost is pretty steady, but it did drop as well because everything dropped. We'll talk about that on the next slide. There are no employee contributions, so everything on the normal cost is employer. So we end up with our total contribution dropping from 7.56% of payroll to 6.71. Funded ratio went up. We just talked about that. We still are on track to amortize it over a close period. So you know, we're at 23 years now. So if you keep going, we will get there in 23 years to amortizing the unfunded. And just like the pension plan, we did drop the discount rate. All right, so next slide, please. All right, this is where we talk about what happened between last year and this year to get to the unfunded we have now. So we always start with our prior year unfunded. We know we have to pay the normal cost. We have an expected employer contribution, which is what we calculated last year's valuation. So if everything would have worked out exactly perfectly, just like our actuarial assumptions predicted, we would have had an expected unfunded of 176.6 million, which is pretty much the same as prior year. So everything would have been sort of a wash, and you would have had the same unfunded going forward. Now, we just talked about how we didn't have that. We had 156 million. So what happened to get us $20 million lower? Well, the first thing is that big claims gain. So that was almost $20 million right there. So that is a good result, and that's something to keep an eye on. But you know, that happens sometimes to where we get, you know, good claims experience, and then the next year it goes the other way. This loss due to assumption changes, this is actually our trend. And what it is we reset our pre-65 trend. So even though we had a really good year for the HMO, if you look at all the national average trend studies out there, we're not seeing a lot of decrease in the active and pre-65 cost, especially with drug cost expected to be very high. So we went ahead and reset the trend, even though we did have a good year, because again, this is for the future. And just because you had, you know, especially in the HMO, such a good result from last year to this year, it doesn't mean that next year you won't be just like everybody else, which is expected to have a certain level of trend. This number 8 here, gain due to data changes. This is a $5 million gain that is a one-time thing. And what this is mostly about is the grandfathered people. So as people retire from active to retiree, we had to kind of guess who was going to be grandfathered, and we used, you know, rounded ages and rounded service. And so we had people that, you know, if we didn't know, we would be more conservative. So we would assume some certain actives would be in grandfathered status, and then it turned out that when they retired, they weren't. They were based on the service-based premiums. So we cleaned up a lot of that. We really went through and looked at, you know, who was getting service-based and who was getting grandfathered benefits. The other thing we did is with the active employees especially, we get data on what health plan they're in. And they're either in a health plan or they're coded as waived. Anyone who is coded as waived as an active, we assume they'll waive as a retiree. But we also had a group of people that just didn't have anything in that field. So in the past, we had been assuming that there must be some kind of, either it was a data issue or maybe they hadn't, you know, signed up yet and it was a lag. So we would stick them in a health plan, you know, because we didn't want to not value them. But we really went through and looked at those people, and there were some that really should have been in waiver status. So we pulled off some people that we had been including before. So it's really just a big data cleanup and trying to just get the best result we can get. So again, that's a one-time thing. You won't see that every year because we did it, fixed it. We had a loss due to the discount rate, of course, because we changed the discount rate. And then there was a small gain due to asset experience. So that could be anything from just the assets earning more than we thought to the contribution being bigger, the benefit payments being smaller, and whatever sense when we went from last year to this year, our assets were higher than we expected. So after all that, we would have had 161.4 as our unfunded. We actually had 156.1, which means we had another gain of $5 million just due to other factors. And that sounds like a lot, but it's really only 1.74% of your liability. So it's under 2% of liability. That's something we would start looking at if it was a gap like that year after year after year. Because there are a lot of assumptions that go into this. And one big one that goes into an OPEB plan and not a pension plan is participation. So now that you have service-based premiums, you might have someone who's eligible, like maybe with 10 or 11, 12 years of service, but their premium is so high that they don't really want to participate. They can get their health care elsewhere for cheaper. So, you know, there could be some things like we're assuming more people that participate than actually are. So again, if this is a gain, 2% gain every single year, that's when we would want to look at it and see if maybe we need to tweak an assumption. If it's a gain one year and a loss the next year, which is more typical, then that would be expected because we don't know exactly what everyone's going to do. So overall, you know, we had a series of gains put together here, which is a good thing for helping with the rate. But do keep in mind that any kind of data changes and even the claims experience, might not happen again next year. But that's it for the OPEB valuation, unless there are questions.
Yeah, this is Virgil. I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
First of all, excellent report. Thank you. The actuarial determined contribution went down from 756 to 671. What's the actual dollar amount of that reduction?
Well, that's a good question. Joey, do you happen to have the copies of the report? I would have to.
Okay, I also want to know the dollar amount of the pension fund increase, which was 0.60. So I can compare those two, and I think one would offset the other more than offset the other. That's my whole point, because these are the two big plans we look over.
I can pull it up real quick.
Yeah, I can get the pension number for you if you want to.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be that percent
Just a moment.
covered payroll, isn't it?
Right. That's, yeah. And again,
yeah, the difference between the 756 and 671, if I did my math correctly without a computer, is 0.85. So if you multiply 0.85 times covered payroll of 261,550, is that how you calculate it?
All right, so this is last year's. I'm getting feedback here. Last year's contribution is 18.8 million, and this year it's 17.5.
17.5 is going to be the contribution for OPEB.
Right.
And that's the decrease. But what's the difference between those two numbers?
It's $1.3 million less than last year.
1.3 million. And how much is the 0.6 for the pension fund more?
we're projected, the fiscal year contribution last year, I believe, was, well, this is for fiscal year 21. So we're looking at 61. I'm sorry, I'm getting there. $61.3 million roughly, compared to 57 last year. So
it's going to go up how much? 4?
About 4 million is what I'm showing from last year's contribution. Again, you're looking at different payroll numbers too, so
0.666% is $4 million. That's how much it went up, 0.6%, according to your number. That don't sound right.
Yeah, Virgil, we plug those into the budget. It's a $4.3 million increase in pension.
But the amount that went in last year, does that include the extra 5 million y'all put in?
No, that's the 57 is the required contribution.
yes, yes.
Okay. It just seems like it's more than I thought it would be by about 0.6%.
So we did a little bit more last year, so it's not going to be as big of an increase because we planned on contributing more in FY19 than we did in 20. So with the new numbers that come out, it's not going to be that big of a change going from 20 to 21.
Well, my whole point is the savings on the OPEB side should help you with the extra cost on the pension fund side. I know you're going to have all kind of budget issues next year. Don't misunderstand me, but I'm just making a point because these are the two plans that the trustees are involved in.
Yeah, so last year, to give you an idea, the county contribution was 23.5 and this year's 24.15. But again, that payroll was based on 242 million last year. This year it's 254. So you're not, you'd have to multiply those amounts. If you multiply those amounts, you get to 57 and 61.
Okay.
It does look like OPEB savings is about half of the pension cost. So
Okay.
kind of.
I'm just bringing that out as a positive thing from some of the things that I know the trustees don't have control over a lot of this stuff, but these are the two plans that we kind of oversee from a trustee standpoint, and I just want to point that out because I think that's a positive thing to say.
Yes, yeah.
Great. Questions for Lisa? All right. Bring on Lisa, additional comments you want to share with us?
But did you ask me?
Yeah. Anything else you want to share?
No, I think not unless there's any more questions.
I got one more question, Lisa. You go either one, but can y'all tell us how Cobb County's pension fund and OPEB fund, as far as what we're doing and trying to how we're comparing to what the trend is across the country? I mean, are we staying up with everybody else and trying to do what we need to be doing, or are we falling behind, or where are we at?
Well, I'd say for the OPEB fund, you're definitely ahead. I mean, you're doing great. There are some other plans that are getting as well funded as yours, but like I said, there's a lot that aren't. And I'll let Joey speak to the pension.
The pension, yeah, it's definitely the funded ratio is behind. I would say most other funds, but you're making proactive steps to try to get that funding ratio up. It's just the traditional plan, is basically what's holding it back. So.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I was just curious about I know other people have been lowering their discount rates, and I know other people have got and they've been lowering their amortization periods. And one quick question on the amortization period: is everybody continuing to go down below 20 and all the way to 0, or what is the plan for these?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you would want. We could look at some other scenarios, like I know we've talked about before, layered basis and things like that. That's what a lot of counties, local governments do, and you can maybe look at that around 20 years, and start maybe looking at layering basis so that every additional base you would reset at 20 years instead of every gain or loss going into 19, 18, 17, and so forth.
Okay.
So that's something we could definitely look at. But
maybe, but when we get to 20, that's 3 years down the road. Okay. I mean, who knows?
That might be something we want to look at that point.
Okay. Okay.
Because you get
So
into
we
negative
doing something
amortization
like
once you
that
get
would
above 20.
effectively
So
put us back in a position of kicking the can down the road again. We sold this as
that's
to the county, putting big contributions in, and 23 years from now, we'll be, fully funded, right?
right. That's correct. Yeah. So you do risk that. Yes.
Okay.
Well, hopefully if we take some more positive acts, and that may not be one of them, but, some other things might be looking at some of the other things. And that's the board's decision on the liability. Slowing down the liability growth is the board's call, not ours.
Correct. Correct. And I think there has been a dialogue ongoing around the office about that. So, okay, great. Well, Joey, Lisa, thank you both so much for your hard work and your thoughtful presentations today. We'll probably circle back and get some coaching from you guys as we put together our presentation to the Board of Commissioners later this year. So
Okay.
any last calls from anyone? Otherwise, you guys can hang around if you're bored, or you can go do other great stuff, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so now we'll shift over to our advisors, and I don't know who's leading the attack today for UBS. Our advisor report.
Hey, Roger, can you hear us okay? Hello?
I can hear you, Earl.
I don't think they can.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll keep this short and sweet because we had gone over the advisor report actually last month, but the only one we'll give you a quick update on is through yesterday, since we had the OPEB where we can calculate the returns immediately, is down 1.59%.
Folks, if you're not talking, please mute your mic.
Austin?
I believe it's Alan's coming through the computer. Alan, could you mute the computer?
It is muted, I think, Austin. I'll check it.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll keep it sweet and short and sweet since we did this last month. But a quick updates on the OPEB account since we have the capacity to do that overnight. So calculating through yesterday, the OPEB is down 1.59% year to date. So we've seen a significant increase in that based on the fact that the market continues to be strong. We're up over 250 points right now on the futures. So if we can continue that, we should see this turn into positive territory in the very near future. The second point on the new business side was the new capital market assumptions, which we sent to all of you. We did an extensive review of this, but we gave you the synopsis of it in a short version. We have two different sets of capital market assumptions, those that are called strategic, which is one business cycle, and those that are called equilibrium, which are multiple business cycles. So we're looking at these now in real terms of about 8-year cycles. So very long term would be your pension actuarial types of assumptions, and short term is what's going on. These actuarial assumptions or capital market assumptions were worked on and changed earlier this year. So technically, we're in the middle of the cycle right now. So on the short term, the capital market assumptions would yield 4.82% over a full cycle. On the equilibrium, 6.87%. Please keep in mind that these capital market assumptions are not putting any benefit to active management, which we typically find that on the equity side adds about 1% or more to them, and on the fixed income side, somewhere in a quarter to 50 basis points. If we go back and look at your plan historically, you have been outperforming your passive indexes by somewhere in the vicinity of 50 basis points, and sometimes up almost to 60 basis points over the last 10 years. So we feel that if you added that premium to it of 50 basis points, we would be well ahead of the 7.25% actuarial assumption. Keep in mind that this particular plan has about 40% of the assets in passive, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing still a premium, but not as big as we would like to see. So that's the short version. Any questions on the asset allocation or the capital market assumptions? And we'd be happy to go into more detail on the individual components.
Yeah, this is Virgil. You said the average of active managers over market is 1%, but we're only 0.5%. Why is that?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, that we did that. I said that on equity managers, not on the entire amount. And secondly, I said active managers, and we have about 40% of the portfolios in passive. So that 40% is about 50, 60 basis points. Take fixed income into consideration, and you get down to actually probably 20 or 30 basis points over the actuarial assumptions, and we've been much higher than that.
Okay, thank you.
So Earl, I'm looking at page 3 of the capital market assumptions. I see strategic and equilibrium. Yes. Strategic being the short run, is that right? And equilibrium is the long run, as you said?
Yes.
What is annualized
risk? Equilibrium being multiple.
Multiple. What is annualized risk? Variance?
That's your standard deviation.
Okay, all right. So we actually believe we'll generate 1.6 on cash in the short run?
Yeah, and somewhere, again, in the long run, that's what they're looking at, because they're looking at a premium attached to what the treasuries would be or the risk-free rate. Okay. It is a normalized calculation, and it's just, remember, these are done on a global basis and then deconstructed down to the U.S.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. Okay, I'll go over it in greater detail and shoot you an email if I have questions. Thank you.
That'll be fine. And keep in mind, the world has sort of changed in the middle of this. So we probably will see these readjusted in a year or so, like we normally do.
Great. Questions for Earl? Okay, well, we've taken, so on the action items for the new business, new capital market assumptions, we're sitting right now at 7.25. And where did we leave it? We're just going to kind of monitor that, or we're going to gradually move it towards 7? I can't remember. Bill's nodding.
My understanding was we were just going to monitor it, and then if somebody felt compelled, we bring it back forward to look at reducing it going forward.
Okay. Because yeah, I would say for now at least I'm comfortable leaving it there for a little while, and I'd like to be able to show. I'm not playing politics here, but it'd be nice to be able to show the Board of Commissioners next year that the funding ratio and the pension actually came up a little bit. I mean, it's the nature of politics. They got to see something for the cash they're going in there. So, okay.
Yeah, this is Virgil. I agree that, you know, we need to for sure get through this year and see what the end of this year brings us, and then get into next year. And I'm okay for at least a couple of years like that.
Great. Okay, so we updated allocations with projected returns. Discussion of managers lagging their peers. Any more comments on that?
We have, a couple. We had talked about that last time about where everybody was. The manager that stands out both in the pension and not in the pension, but in the DC plan is the International Oakmark. And we put together a search, and we're recommending that the committee consider replacing them. We've always thought Oakmark. Can you pull up, Sylvia, the search, please?
It's going to be the UBS, AAS, and the search PDF, and it's going to be page 28 of 51.
So in looking at the Oakmark, it has always been a value fund. In looking at the value index, it has outperformed it considerably until this year. It has dropped tremendously. It's underperforming its benchmarks, so both the core benchmarks and the value index. It has been, as the slide will show, a superior performer over time, but it just recently dropped off. And we felt, given the conditions of what's going on, that going to a more core manager would make more sense. If we take a look at this versus the large value universe, you can see that Oakmark has been consistently, with a couple annual numbers dropping, but in a top quartile, if not top decile performer over time. The next page, please. If we look over rolling 3-year periods of time, we can see again it's been up at the top for a long period of time, and now even on the rolling periods it's been coming down. Next slide, please. And now if we amortize this last year's performance and this year's performance first quarter, that has actually impacted their placement in universe comparisons significantly. So now over the shorter period of time, for 5 years or less, it's at the bottom of the heap, but it starts creeping up at 7 and 10 years to its previous position. Next slide, please. So in putting together search of a more core-oriented investment, if we take a look, we included the Vanguard total index return, which is in the pension plan. And if we compare it versus the overall universe, we can see that it's been doing what it's supposed to do versus the index, but it's just an option that consists of everything, value, growth, and whatever. And it's measured against the CRISP indexes rather than the EPA or the ACTUARIAL US indexes, and that's its composition. We put in Euro-Pacific growth. Morningstar categorized it as a growth manager, but when we take a look at it and the way they portray themselves and then they portray their styles, it's a core manager. And then the MFS International Diversified is actually a blend of several of the MFS funds. It's a more core, hardcore core option, and it's had absolutely spectacular results. If we go back to the next page, please. If we look at the individual calendar years, we can see that it has maintained the top half, if not top quartile performance every year. Next page, please. And if we look at 3-year rolling periods, we see similar, again, placement. In case you hadn't gotten it, our recommendation would be if we change, we'd move to the MFS fund as a more diversified, more risk-beneficial fund. Next page, please. If we take a look at a total risk reward for the last 3 years, you can see the red triangle, up triangle is way up in the lower risk and much higher returns. You can see that the Vanguard fund is actually, versus the ACTUARIAL US, slightly more risk and less return than the index. And again, it's not a pure comparison to the index because they use the CRISP index is what they are benching themselves to. Next page, please. Again, for 5 years, we see the same thing. We see Vanguard and everybody else moving to the left, and now less risk than the index and higher returns. And finally, the next page. And if we go to 7 years, we see the Vanguard fund is right on the index and has done what it's supposed to do. And if we take a look, we see the MFS fund continues to be further to the left, which means less risk, and further above, which means higher returns. The rest of the group has a lot of additional slides if you want to go through it. But if we take a look at the numbers that we have just published year to date and take a look at it, we can see that the Oakmark number for year to date is still down considerably, down 25%. If we take a look at the Euro-Pacific, it is down 8%. And if we take a look at the other, the MFS, it's down 4% and change. So it continues to have a premium placement year to date. Questions?
Earl, state one more time what your recommendation is.
Is the MFS, which stands for Massachusetts Financial Services, based out of Boston, diversified international fund.
And what's the amount of money in the Oakmark fund?
I don't have that in front of me.
That's okay. That's okay.
Oakmark is 1.6% of the overall DC plans, approximately $1.8 million.
Okay. Okay. I've heard enough to make a motion to go along with UBS's recommendation to move.
There a second? Who was that second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Great. Right.
That was me. That was me.
Motion and second to support UBS recommendation to remove Oakmart and replace them with MFS as our international exposure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Motion carries. Thank you.
Roger, go ahead. Can
I
I,
was just going to say that concludes the business that we had on the table.
Earl, remind me, I know y'all made a move like our last meeting and it was from one manager to another manager that we already had. Remind me what that was?
We moved the John Hancock equity manager to the S&P 500 index fund. It was just
That's
a move
right.
from A into the B.
That was in the pension fund,
So
correct?
now ICMA can put out the communications for both of them. I'm sorry, what was the question?
That was in the pension fund, not the OPEB fund, right?
No, that was the OPEB. That was in the DC fund.
Oh, it was? Okay. I was thinking it was a pension
Yes,
fund.
sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No, sir.
Earl, just a clarification on that change in the MFS International. Are y'all notifying ICMA RC? Is that something that we need to take care of here?
Technically, that would be you. We're happy to talk to them if they have questions as far as the tickers or anything else.
Okay. Thank you.
But they should do that simultaneously with the John Hancock move to the Indian index fund.
Okay. Any more questions? All right.
I have one, Roger. What happened to the beard?
I started to look too much like Grizzly Adams. So I did shave it back. I've got a little stubble now, trying to get the Don Johnson look. So there you go. Okay. Well,
I kept getting told I look like Santa.
Yeah, it was not a good look. So thank you to UBS for a fine update and report. And I think we're making appropriate adjustments there. We have the next meeting scheduled for Wednesday, September 9th. We do not know yet whether it will be live or via WebEx. So stay tuned, I guess, on that. UBS, anything you guys want to look at next time?
We'll have the quarterly report, and hopefully we'll continue to see things. The only thing I've just update is that this is still an event-driven marketplace, and it's a news-driven marketplace, and we can have riots and demonstrations and poor earnings and a pandemic, but the market seems to still want to go up. So in the vernacular of our business, we say you can't fight the Fed.
Right. Okay. Very good. Very good.
Roger, this is Virgil. Before we adjourn, do you anticipate going to the Board of Commissioners before our next meeting in September, or are we just going to kind of wait and see what all's going on?
Well, once we get a little bit of clarity on the market settling down, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, then we would go back. I'd like to get them a report, maybe late summer. Of course, it's subject to their scheduling orders, obviously, and they're in the middle of a campaigns, and that always plays into how busy they get, of course. But we would circle back to UBS as well as to Lisa and Joey to get some guidance, so we put together a succinct but accurate report.
Okay.
If I can, I just want to add just one thing so you can still feel good about the performance of the fund versus the others in the country, Virgil. For the 3-year period of time, this fund it places in the 26th percentile of funds under $1 billion. For 5 years, the 30th percentile, and for 7 years, the 20th percentile.
Wow. We can live. Yeah, thank you. Those are great numbers that we'll certainly share and Good commercial there, Earl. Good work. So, anything else for the good of the cause? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. There's Mr. Moon. I saw your mouth move.
So moved.
Sheriff Warren. Okay, very good. So with having done so, we hereby adjourn the meeting. Everybody stay safe. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good week.